Hi, today I'm going to speak about my mixed feelings that I have for the finale of It Welcome to Derry, the horror television show produced by HBO. The TV show is starring Bill Skarsgård, Madeline Stowe, Jovan Adepo, Taylor Page, and Chris Chalk. The series is directed by Andy Muschietti and it's based on the novel called It, which is by Stephen King. So let me give you a brief summary of what the TV show is about. So Pennywise is the iconic monster clown which terrorizes the town of Derry. It stalks mostly like the children of Derry and terrorizes them and ultimately devours them. The thing about Pennywise is that he has a feeding cycle, so he appears every 27 years to attack the people of Derry. And if you have watched the movies, you may have noticed that those events are set in the late 80s, and you had the group of kids called the Losers Club in the movies, and they were the ones who had to fight against Pennywise. But this TV show is about one of his previous feeding cycles, which is in the early 60s. So it focuses on the characters at that time. It focuses on the problems of the Derry citizens of the early 60s and what they had to deal with when it comes to Pennywise. It Welcome to Derry has only one season right now, and my mixed feelings are about the finale of season 1. I know that a lot of people liked the finale. It had a lot of hype and a lot of anticipation, like it created a lot of anticipation for the next season. But what I am trying to say is that I enjoyed the show, but until the finale. When the finale happened, I kind of started to have some mixed feelings and my anticipation for the next season went down. So let me give you an example of why I started to feel negative about the finale. Pennywise is too much in the open. I mean, there was something creepy and mysterious about him being in the shadows. When you watch the movies, if you have watched the movies, you must have noticed that he's always in the sewers. He rarely comes out. He's rarely out in the open. So as a horror movie, when you watch that film, you kind of feel this like unsettling nature and a kind of creepiness and a sense of isolation, because you know that he's always there in the shadows and he's not everywhere all the time. So when you see him like in broad daylight nearly all the time and a lot of characters are aware of him, it doesn't feel that creepy. And you see him like terrorizing so many characters in this show. Let me list out the other issues that I had with the finale. Some of the issues that I had were issues that I was having while watching the previous episodes. I'm going to list out those problems right now, but when the finale happened, that's when I was like completely sure, like, okay, these are the problems that are there. So some of the problems that I talk about right now are going to be problems that I had while watching the show as well. One of the problems that I would talk about is there's no focus on the missing children concept. Too many adults are aware of the monster. The mysterious is gone, and basically the monster is targeting too many adults in this TV show. So the metaphor of ignorant adults in a corrupt society is gone. To further elaborate on that, when you watch the movie and it just showed this monster targeting only the children, there was this whole metaphor that was working out in the favor of the movie, which is that it's about childhood, and it was mostly only the children who noticed the monster. I think that was very important for the movie because we are made aware that Derry is this very corrupt town and it feels like it's an infected town and it's an ignorant town, and you see all the grown-ups don't really care about what's happening to the children. And that is also one of the reasons that Pennywise was able to get away with kidnapping so many kids in every cycle. And it was mostly only the kids who had to deal with Pennywise. And also, I think that entire idea which I shared with you right now, it was a good metaphor for real life where children notice things that adults don't, and adults get too busy with their lives. So children are in a kind of vulnerable place. What I'm trying to say is that when the focus is just children, the vulnerability is high, the stakes are high, and things are more frightening. There's a difference when the main characters are adults in a horror movie and the main characters are children in a horror movie, because when the children are the main characters and they are being chased by some kind of scary monster, you feel this tension as an audience because you know that children are not as strong as adults to fight off any kind of demon. And then there's the next point. Once you have finished watching season 1, you realize that there is this implication that Pennywise is not defeated. What I mean by that is, before the TV show we had the two movies, It Chapter 1 and It Chapter 2, and those movies were covering events that happened decades later after the events of the TV show. So basically in the timeline, It Welcome to Derry is in the early 60s and It Chapter 1 is in the late 80s. It Chapter 2 is in 2019. So It Chapter 2 is the latest part of the timeline. And when you watch It Chapter 2 and you get to the end of that movie, you see that the Losers Club, they defeat Pennywise completely. So he has been completely defeated, and you understand when you watch that movie, okay, you have gained like complete victory and Pennywise won't terrorize Derry again. But when you watch this TV show, which is talking about events that happened way back in the early 60s, and when you come to the finale, there's a scene which indicates that. Let me break down the scene. Pennywise is terrorizing one of the kids, and he looks at her and he talks about the events of It Chapter 2, about the fact that he knows that one day that he would die. And then he talks about time being like, you get this idea that the concept of time is different for Pennywise. It's like past, present and future get mixed together. And when you come to one of the last scenes in the final episode, the kid who got terrorized, her name is Marge. She says to one of her friends that one of the friends was also terrorized by Pennywise. She tells her that she believes that Pennywise might, because the concept of time is so different to him, that maybe Pennywise is trying to time travel and go back in time to prevent the events of It Chapter 2. Basically, he's trying to prevent his death, which happens in the future. This indication that Pennywise is not defeated at all, I think, is them trying to make the audience come back for season 2. That is my theory. That is just what I think. But I think the problem with that revelation is that it takes away the gravity of the final battle in It Chapter 2. Now that you know that no matter what happens to Pennywise, whether you defeat him several times or you kill him permanently, if he has this whole time traveling thing going on in his head where he can go back in time, then it starts to feel like a never-ending story, and it feels like there will never be closure, because you'll always be thinking, okay, even in the TV show, if he gets defeated, okay, he can again time travel and go way back in time, maybe it's like centuries back, and try to prevent the events all over again. The agency and strengths of a monster that is supposed to be villainous is questioned. So another reason that I felt a bad taste in my mouth after watching the finale is now the Losers Club, like, they don't feel special anymore. The Losers Club felt really special because when you were introduced to them in the first movie and you got to know about the town and how corrupt it is and how none of the grown-ups care about the kids, and you know that these children in the Losers Club, not only did they have to deal with Pennywise, but they had their own internal traumas that they had to face. So seeing them get together and finally come together as a group, a friendship group, and rely on each other's strengths and powers to defeat Pennywise, that feels special, because when you watch it, the assumption that you make is, okay, these are the first kids to go against Pennywise, and none of the kids in the past had done that before, because Pennywise had been terrorizing their for centuries and none of them had made a stand against him. So when you know the history of all these like vulnerable children who were terrorized and were killed off and they could do nothing about it, and you have this group called the Losers Club who finally faced Pennywise and defeated him, that was obviously sentimental and special. And yeah, now there is a difference when you watch this TV show, because you see that in the early 60s, in the final episode of the TV show, a whole group of people came together to defeat Pennywise, and this group included children as well as grown-ups, and Pennywise got thrown off all over again. Also, coming back to the Losers Club, their sacrifices and efforts feel less meaningful if you know that they didn't truly beat Pennywise. So it was not just the Losers Club that was special, it was the movie series that was special, because it felt introspective, it felt very focused, and the fact that, you know, there's a group of 7 children versus Pennywise and no one else is aware about the monster or how to defeat it. It was very focused, like I said, because the focus is only on those 7 characters in the Losers Club. We are focusing only on their internal conflicts and their friendship, and the entire story revolves around what happens to them. Now when it comes to the TV show, you have almost like this hyper awareness of the monster by so many people, and even the American military knows about Pennywise, so they show up at Derry because they want to take advantage of the powers of Pennywise. So you have the whole military knowing about it. And while I appreciate that this TV show revealed so much about the lore of Pennywise and like the events that brought him to Earth, and it really gets very nerdy about all these concepts that Stephen King had and explaining all of them. I think knowing too much about the monster and its background and how it came here and getting a breakdown of the nature of the monster and all of that, it kind of takes away the mystery of the monster and thereby reduces the fear you have. To give you an example of the introspective nature that I was talking about, I think a very good example in this TV show is the storyline revolving around the daughter of the real Pennywise. The daughter's name is Ingrid Kirsch. Her storyline reminded me of the introspective personal nature and the metaphors of the Losers Club storyline. What I mean when I say Ingrid is the daughter of Pennywise, it's not that the monster spawned a child, but we get to know about the real Pennywise, which means in one of the episodes in this TV show, we find out that before the 60s, before the events of this TV show, there's a flashback where we see there's actually a human who dressed up as a clown who called himself Pennywise. And when he was part of the carnival or the fair in Derry, the monster noticed how he was able to attract children, and so he somehow lured the real Pennywise into the shadows, killed him and took his form so that it would be easier for him to target his victims. And so the real Pennywise had a daughter called Ingrid Kirsch, and we see her facing this trauma as a child, like her father going missing and her accepting that her father is dead. But then it cuts back to the early 60s and we find out that Ingrid Kirsch has been aware of the monster terrorizing Derry from time to time, but she thinks that it's her actual father and she's kind of trying to save him. So we get all these real metaphors about grief and about her having issues with the father dying and her trying to cope with it. It's very focused and like introspective, and it feels very personal, and that reminded me of the movies about the Losers Club. Another concern that I have after watching the finale is one of the other revelations in this TV show, and that revelation is the fact that the kids in the early 60s, some of them were related to the Losers Club. So when you find out that these characters are related to each other, you get the implication that Pennywise is going after the bloodline, and that makes the effect wear off. And when I speak about the effect wearing off, the effect that I'm talking about is the effect of the raw strength of random strangers ganging up and trusting each other together to defeat Pennywise. The irony is, I feel like maybe the people who made this TV show, they created these connections, like, you know, the relationships between the Losers Club and the kids of the 60s. They probably did this to create this kind of continuity, but the ironic thing is that it kind of threw me off. The creators probably revealed those connections to pull you further into the story and make you anticipate it for season 2, but for me it created the opposite effect. Another thing I wanted to point out is that there's this ambiguity of whether the town people remember or forget what happened to them, especially when something such as the big fog happens. Speaking about the big fog, when you watch the TV show and when you're watching the last episode, there's this huge mysterious fog that kind of engulfs the town of Derry, and so obviously all the residents are aware of it and they're trying to run away from this weird mist. And towards the end of the episode, the fog disappears. So it makes you wonder, so does this mean that the residents, they will like completely forget these events and there'll be kind of like a mass amnesia of some kind? And will they actually forget all the events of what happens in the TV show as time passes on? Because there's one part of the story which talks about the racism towards black people. They show this white supremacist cult burning down a nightclub that was meant for black people. So you see all these black people burning in a fire, dying in a fire, and after this horrible racist attack happens, they show the news being spread across Derry that the whole thing was an accident. So you assume that, okay, nobody knows that some racist thing happened, and they think, okay, it's just a mistake and the fire just happened on its own. So if that is a memory that the Derry residents of the 60s have, and then they pass down that memory to the future generations, then how come in the Losers Club in the movies, how do they know that it was a racist attack? Because there's a scene in the movie where the Losers Club, they're talking about this event, the Black Spot incident, Black Spot is the name of the nightclub, and when they're talking about it, they literally say, okay, this is the event, this was the fire that was caused by the racist cult. So that means they know about the fact that it was not an accident. So it creates this ambiguity of whether the residents of Derry know what happened to them, because one of the powers of Pennywise is that he makes people forget. But when you have all these huge events happening and there's a fog and there's the military and a lot of big things happen in the TV show, how can the residents forget that over time? Marge, who is one of the characters in this TV show, Pennywise reveals to her that she will have a son called Richie in the future, and Richie is one of the people in the Losers Club, and she gets to know that Richie will end up being one of the people who kills Pennywise. Would she forget such a major revelation like this over time? And when she finally gave birth to Richie, does this mean she has completely forgotten what Pennywise told to her? I just wish they had been more clear about this whole thing regarding the memory loss of the people in Derry, because that is a very important concept which connects to trauma and repressing trauma. What I would say is that so many things happen in the TV show, and there were so many ideas that I liked as well, and I can understand why the creators want introduce this idea that Pennywise is not defeated and that he can time travel back to the past and try to stop his own death. I understand why they introduced that idea into this TV show, because then the viewers would come back for season 2. There would be this anticipation whether, like, how can we actually defeat Pennywise if he can go back in time. And so that kind of works as a bait to get people to watch the next seasons. For me, it created the opposite effect. Now I don't feel that much of hype for the next season. There were certain expectations that I had when they introduced this TV show. There were also a few more expectations that I had when I found out that this TV show is going to have a few seasons. What I expected and what I wanted was this. I wanted it to be like an anthology series. I just wanted each season to be horrifying history lessons of the events of Derry. And the reason I wanted it to be that way is this. Because when it's an anthology series which is just like the history lessons of the town of Derry and the traumas and all of that, it creates an intriguing setting for me. Basically a history lesson of the massacres, the deaths, the tragedies, and the traumas that were faced by different citizens. And so I think I have revealed to you everything that I can about my concerns with the finale, and who knows, maybe the next season might surprise me. This show had strong ideas especially when it leans into this introspective personal nature of the stories. I also liked it when the TV show covered the history between Pennywise and the Native Americans. I appreciated that angle and its meaningful representation of the indigenous community, but I wish it had stayed true to the nature of the movie It Chapter 1. Impactful and given enough time to matter without over-explaining the lore or stripping away the mystery. A lot of the horror loses its power when Pennywise is too exposed, when adults and even the army are fully aware of him, and then the mystery is gone. The shift away from missing children lowers the vulnerability and the stakes, and the idea that Pennywise has been challenged before makes the final battle in Chapter 2 feel less meaningful, turning the story into something that never truly ends. What are your thoughts? Are you a massive It fan or a massive Stephen King fan? What are your thoughts on the finale? Are you looking forward to season 2? Do you like the movies better? Which gang of kids did you like better? Let me know what your thoughts are.